It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Breakfast, into another Friday. It's been, for whatever reason, for us, this week is sort of just dragged on. But the weekend is not too far away as we talk your property news and information. It is a Friday, October the 11th. Interesting little piece about the prospective home buyers' pessimism about the current housing market has hit its lowest point since early 2023. Now, that is according to the Westpac Melbourne Institute Consumer Sentiment Survey. Now, consumers expect interest rates to either fall or stay stable, with house prices set to rise in the coming year. Some buyers, this is interesting, they're very eager to purchase before potential rate cuts drive up the competition. And the time to buy a dwelling measure, that rose 78 points, though still below the long-term average of 120 points. Local factors they highlight, such as first home buyer assistance in Queensland and South Australia, have also driven up improvements. So let's welcome in, off the back of that, Veronica Morgan from Home Buyer Academy. And a very good morning to you, Veronica. Welcome back. Pessimism among the current housing market hitting its lowest point, apparently, since 2023.
Good morning. Yes, I love these surveys. It's always interesting because, I'm a bit of a contrarian, and I look at these results and I think, okay, Melbourne, definitely pessimistic. Perth, not so pessimistic. The thing about Australia is that we're not one property market, but underlying all of that, consumer sentiment, it does have a lot to play in the property market. There's no doubting that. And we certainly have seen, and anecdotally, we've spoken to buyers across the country that have indicated in many cases that they are seeking to sort of jump the gun, if you like, ahead of anticipated price rises as a result of interest rate falls. What I would do is encourage people to exercise caution when they think that they can time the market, because the market may not do what they think it's going to do.
Yeah, so that will be a very interesting metric to keep an eye on, particularly into the first quarter of 2025, which is fast approaching. Now, we want to talk about the importance of having, and this is a good one, a proactive property manager, because this is very important.
Yes, extremely important. If you have an investment property, or if you're a tenant, both of those categories require a proactive property manager to have a good experience.
So what is the difference then between a proactive one and just your normal run-of-the-mill, the regular property manager?
Well, I guess there's a real perception out there that being a property manager is a real thankless task, and it is. I mean, there's a lot of troubleshooting, a lot of running around, a lot of phone calls, a lot of, responding to problems and all the rest of it. The problem is that the more reactive you are and the more you fall into that reactive pattern, the less inclined you are really to be working at proactively, maximising the value of the property for the landlord, but also maximising the experience of living there for the tenant. And both of those things do go hand in hand to increase, the return on investment for the landlord. So these things are not mutually exclusive. It is a real challenge in the property management space because increasingly, as costs have been driven up, a lot of people are putting on, or a lot of property managers are putting on juniors to execute a lot of tasks. And this ability, I guess, to be proactive, and that, I guess, the gap between the reactive property manager and the proactive one is really widening. And people are seeing that in a negative way. Both tenants are seeing that and also landlords.
You talk about the juniors coming on board. I wonder what you feel about these companies that are sort of going interstate. They're setting up an office. That's not really where their core business is, but they're throwing in a junior to represent that market. Of course, it makes a lot of business sense, but this, for the landlord can be a little bit of a trap.
I think that scaling a property management business is very appealing from a business point of view. I mean, it's an asset. And if you've got a real estate agency, you'll know that your sales side is not really an asset. It's bringing in revenue, but your property management is actually where the value is. And so a lot of businesses are smart and business owners are smart. They think, okay, well, that's the part of the business that I really need to grow and scale. Then you sort of hit a bump because, of course, trying to scale when it's really difficult to get really good quality, highly experienced and proactive property managers in your team. And so there is this sort of problem and a bottleneck with doing that. And yet the temptation is to scale. And I've seen lots of businesses get very, very big. They've lost that personal touch. And both tenants and landlords do complain about that. And a lot of the feedback we get from landlords is very much that, well, I had a great experience until so-and-so property manager left. You know what I mean? So it's very, very dependent on the individual. And if you are trying to build a business and throwing a lot of junior, untrained, inexperienced staff, then that is going to cause problems.
The other thing too with landlords, this just does my head in. I just can never fathom why landlords are not doing proper due diligence around giving their properties or property to a manager to look after. It's just crazy stuff. They don't really do what they need to do.
I think there's a lack of understanding amongst property investors as to the difference that a proactive property manager can make to their experience of owning that property, but also the value over time. And they say, well, I'm going to compare on fees. And I guess that comes back to the property managers who do provide that higher level of service to be able to communicate how that actually manifests. For example, one extra week that your property sits on the market without being rented out because they haven't got the rent right, or they haven't got the pitch right, or they haven't got the marketing out on time, or whatever it is that they haven't done, where opportunity has been missed, one extra week can erode that extra small percentage difference in fee almost immediately. And so, I think owners have to actually start looking at the whole picture there of what a property manager adds to their investment, and look at the cost as an investment itself, if you like, rather than purely just a cost. And if they look at it just as a cost, they're going to try and chase the cheapest fee. But if they actually understand that property manager that they choose can really add value to them, then they're going to look at the fees very differently.
When we come back, we'll drill down a little bit more on some of the dangers for the landlords when they are just running after those cheapest rates out there. We're back after this.
We help to break down real estate every day to help you better understand the Australian property market.
We can't build quick enough. Our population trajectory is holding strong. We've got some really good developers and builders trying to get some good mixed-use product out of the market to meet supply first quarter in 2025. I don't see it being too dissimilar to what it is right now.
I think if you go back to the start of COVID, this wouldn't have been the prediction that a company like yours would be looking at Melbourne to start buying and advising.
No, definitely not. There's still a lot of opportunity for our clients, in WA. When we're sitting down and assessing the portfolios of the clients that we work with day in and day out, value for money, we're starting to look elsewhere, and the Melbourne market for us is starting to stand out.
Every morning from 6 a.m. across Australia, we deliver you the latest property news, commentary and predictions from Perth to Cairns and from Melbourne to Brisbane, 7 days a week, only on the Real Estate Podcast.
And it is a Real Estate Friday, working our way into another weekend. Just got to get through today. We are talking about property managers and what some of the landlords are doing across the country. One of the dangers is landlords are shopping around for the cheapest rates out there. I'll get you to talk to that. And I also want to sort of circle back to why the due diligence isn't being done. And perhaps if you're a landlord, write down 5 things that you want your property manager to do for your property. Write them down and then ask them in person. Say, what about this question, and this question? But we'll get to that in just a moment. The dangers of shopping around for the cheapest rate. There are those legitimate fears, aren't there?
We talk to a lot of people that have been property investors for a long time across the whole country, and it's really interesting the wide range of stories that we will get in terms of the experience people have had with different property managers. Some are amazing, some are absolutely magnificent, and others are just mortifying. Only today I heard a story about a property. This is an absentee landlord, i.e. the landlord lives in one city and this property is in another city. And the tenants had vacated earlier than their vacate date, and they left the garage door open. And another agent in the area actually rang the owner to say, look, the garage door on your rental property is open and it appears that the tenants have vacated. Now, her own property manager didn't know that they'd moved out. And when she said to the property manager, can you please go to the property and close the garage door because people can access the house directly through the garage, the property manager refused.
Oh.
So that's the sort of attention you get. Now, this is also, the feedback from the owner who was telling me this story was like, and we've had a revolving door of property managers. They don't seem to care. The business has recently grown quite exponentially. And so from the landlord's perspective, she literally as a plane ride away. She can't even get to her own property to close the door. And I mean, that's maybe an extreme circumstance, but it's typical of if you don't actually take the time to go with an agency that will commit to serving you and providing abundant service.
That's one way, of course, picking up some new business for the agent that got on the phone and said, hey, excuse me, your garage door is open. But coming back to those questions, maybe 3 questions, Veronica, that landlords should pose to these property management companies so that they're at least ticking off 3 important aspects.
Yeah. One really important thing is routine inspections. And so you might sort of say tenants don't want to be interrupted every 3 months with a routine inspection, and maybe they don't. But if there's a value in it for the tenant, i.e. we're interested, the owner of this property is interested in keeping it up to standard, really want to make sure that you actually have a good experience living here. There's different ways that you can pitch these inspections, but also not sending out the junior just to tickle the box and go, yeah, I've been there. But it's actually sending out somebody who's got some experience to say, well, actually, I can see the beginnings of a bit of mold over there, or I can see that there's a buildup of leaves in the gutters. I can see these areas or these issues of the property that just need a little bit of maintenance. And because if we attend to these on an ongoing basis, we save a lot of money down the track if we let these things build up. I know that some owners will be thinking, I don't want to be bothered with this sort of stuff. And you know what? They can go out there and fee shop and they can go and get the cheapest property manager, because if they're the owner doesn't want to look after the property and look after the tenant, then fair enough. But if you really are interested in keeping your property in peak condition, and that means in maximising its value, but also giving yourself the opportunity to get maximum rent for the property, then you will value a property manager that does proper quarterly inspections. So that's the first thing. And I think too, beyond that, you would be looking at somebody who is proactive in how they, as the lease is coming up to an end, how are they interacting with the tenant to work out, well, what are the tenant's plans? Are they going to stay? Are they planning on moving? What is the current accurate rental expectation for that property? And really getting in, say, 3 months even before the end of the lease to make sure that there's a smooth transition if that tenant is going to be moving out. That will save money as well, just having it available, less days vacant.
And here we are, we've got this run up towards Christmas. Something that I always used to do, and it doesn't cost you a lot. Hey, if you make it $150 and you put together a little bit of a hamper and you give that to your tenant at Christmas time, anybody is going to appreciate that. It's a small token, $150 worth. Might have a bottle of wine, some crackers, some chocolates, but they will remember you as to somebody that is actually giving them something, because they're giving you all the way through the year rent. The least you can do is say, hey, thanks for looking after my property. Here's a bit of a Christmas hamper.
If we started respecting the tenants and started respecting the people that are paying the rent, it is a bit of a mind shift, change for some people to be thinking about that. But certainly in our business, in Preferental, we have the attitude that, yes, the property is our client's investment, right? It is part of their wealth building strategy, no doubt about it. However, it is the tenant's home. And I think that, sending a gift at Christmas is a lovely idea in the sense that as long as it's just not tokenistic, that it needs to go hand in hand with an attitude of respect towards those tenants and the fact that they are living in that home and it is their home. And I think that that's very important to never forget.
And if possible, turn up in person. Don't just let the courier send it. Hey, great stuff. Veronica, enjoy your weekend and look forward to catching you back soon.
Thanks very much. Appreciate chatting.
We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.